form. Remind anybody who's not seen it to flash up on the screen that we are recording today's meeting and we'll go onto the website. Any questions or concerns anyone has about the minutes before I seek approval, please? Thank you. Content to approve. Thank you very much. In terms of the action tracker, there are 3 items on there. The sickness absence dive, which Heather will take us through on today's agenda. A status update report on emergency preparedness, the EPRR stuff, which is due to come back to us in the spring. And from our last meeting, there were 1 or 2 issues to delve into on from the Learning from Death report for Liverpool Women's Hospital, and we think that's coming back next month. So they were the action tracker items. I've not been notified of any urgent matters arising. So our agenda today, usual and right format for assurance and risk. We've got the where we are now with finance, which looks at month 8, the formal position reported, validated through till the end of November. It's in private board tomorrow that we will have a more forward look consideration as to what all this means and what happens in the next 75 days and what we need to do to manage our financial position as best as we can. But today is about understanding formally where we were at the end of November. We'll be able, I hope tomorrow, Rob, to get some flavour of December, what all that looks like. Then, as I say, the sickness absence, a deeper dive with Heather, then the usual site reports and corporate risk reports, and then any outstanding items that we haven't by then covered in terms of the performance reports across all the sites. So we start with finance report. James, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say before we pass on to Rob for this.
Probably the main one that Rob's just, he's back. I was going to say just gone. I think I had an issue with his computer. No, I think you said it already, David. We're going to look through the forward look and the forecast tomorrow. So today's really just about the record of the month 8 performance and sites will follow on from that. So I'll hand over to Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Apologies, I couldn't. The sound went all tinny, so I didn't catch any of the prelude. But I do have a presentation, which are the papers in the pack. But I do have a presentation in kind of past couple of times form, David, if that's okay, and it will link with the sites who will look at where they are at month 8, which I think will be a good lead into tomorrow's view of month 9, if that's okay. So I'll just share my screen. Is that, can we see that? I'll go on to slideshow. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
It's not on at the moment, Rob.
Okay, let's try again. Is it on now? It says I'm sharing my screen. Yes.
No.
Okay. That's my 3rd time lucky. Apologies.
Enable editing on the slides.
Yeah, it is. It's just when you say share. Yeah. Presenting team. Anyone can see yet?
No, nothing's coming up, Rob. Do you want me to put it up on my screen?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Daniel,
If you-
that'd be helpful. I don't know why it's saying it is sharing, so thank you. Okay. So next slide, please, Daniel. We've got three main sections, but really the first section is just an update on UHLG performance at month 8, links to the board paper. We are going to look then at where the sites are at month 8, recognising that over the past days with month 9, we're looking to firm up a forecast at month 9 for the year end. Just as usual, we just got a section on, we've got the FPRM, the Financial Plan Recovery meeting with Stephen Hay and PwC and Region next Tuesday, and the action items updates on that. And then the final section, just for completeness, is where we're up to with the PwC partnership work. And in the appendices, we have the financial recovery plan that we talked about last time. So we just go on to section 1, please, Daniel. And I'll whip through this. But the good news is that at month 8, without excluding deficit support funding, the group is actually ahead of plan slightly by £200,000. And the position is noted there overall 57.9 million, Luft at 46 million deficit, Liverpool Women's at 17, and Liverpool Heart and Chest at a surplus of just under 6. If we remind ourselves, though, that's good news, but deficit support funding, which is assessed on a system basis, has continued to be based on confidence of the system delivering plan, is what we're told, has continued to be withheld for Q2, Q3, and the latest information we've had is going into Q4, it will continue to be withheld. So at the moment, that has a significant impact on 2 of our organisations. Luft has had 18.5 million withheld up to month 8, and Liverpool Women 6.4. If it continues until the end of the year, that will be a 44.8 million impact against our plan. The CIP continues, and we continue as a group to be ahead of plan. We've done 77 and just short of 77.5 million pounds up to month 8. And that includes 62 million at Luft, which is 4 million ahead of plan. I'm rounding the numbers. Liverpool Women's just shy of 8 million. Again, 800,000 ahead of plan. Liverpool Heart and Chest just slightly below plan, but still recording 7 million up to month 8. The risk obviously continues to remain the recurrent effect, and that is a direct impact on our exit run rates and where we start next year. The forecast as at month 8, and we'll go into this a little bit more detail, but as you know, we have a mid case, which is effectively the likely case, a best case, and a downside case. Good news is that Liverpool Women's and Liverpool Heart and Chest mid case, a likely case we're predicting is to hit plan by the end of the year, excluding the DSF effect for Liverpool Women's, of course. For Luft, however, based on current run rate and what we knew at month 8, and the work we did with PwC on the financial recovery plan, was identifying a £21.1 million negative variance to plan at the end of the year. And that's our mid case at month 8. Cash balance continues to be challenging in two of our organisations. As you can see, Luft had at the end of month 8 just over 3 million in the bank, which was about one operating day's worth of cash. Liverpool Women's 0.3, again 1 day, and better position in Liverpool Heart and Chest with 51.3 million pounds of cash in the bank. Based on those numbers, the underlying deficit or surplus at the end of the year would be 141 million deficit at Luft. Liverpool Women's would be 35 million deficit, and Liverpool Heart and Chest would be a surplus of just under 1 million. All of this position excludes any structural cost, obviously impacts of the assessment we had of deficit support funding, of drivers of the deficit structural costs, which none of that is in this year. If I just go on now, just a bit of the detail, I'll scamper through this. We've just got the I&Es just pointing out, obviously there, the in-year position, particularly on CIP, the in-year position, which is healthy, transacted up to month 8, but clearly the recurrent CIP forecasts across the board really is 48% of the recurrent plan expected at Luft, 70% of the recurrent plan expected at Liverpool Women's, and 79% at Liverpool Heart and Chest. So really continues to be work to do on translating, not only continuing with our CIP, but translating them into recurrent benefits. Next slide, please, Daniel. The run rate impacts, again, we track this. Good news, Liverpool Heart and Chest, Liverpool Women's, based on the average run rate required, are on plan. Bottom line, Luft remains, unsurprisingly, off that average by a net position of 4.3 million. The biggest impact and driver being pay, as we know, around about 5.6 million away from plan. There is an offset there with some income back post, but nevertheless the net position is over 4 million pounds a month away from that average that we was required in our plan at the start of the year. Next slide, please. As you know, we look at the risks in 3 different ways across all the organisations. One, we look at the CIP based on NHSE formula, and we can see, this is the Luft example, that gives a gap of around about 19 million pounds based on expected delivery of red, amber, green CIPs. We do an extrapolation forecast based on what we've actually achieved and rolling that position forward to the end of the year, and that would be, in Luft's case, just short of 30 million pounds gap. And we do a methodology developed by Simon Worthington for NHSE, and on that basis, that has an alignment with our position at month 8 of the 21.1 million pound shortfall. So we can see a range there, but the 21 million is certainly within that range. We just know also the cash risk, and we continue to apply for distressed cash funding. If we just scamper on, Liverpool Women's, again, I'm not going to spend too much time because we are predicting to hit the plan on the mid case, but you can see there continues to be a risk in the plan, but we are confident that we can get there on our mid case. And similarly, in the next slide, we do the same methodology to describe the risks. There is a risk to the plan. It doesn't achieve itself, but nevertheless we are projecting that we hit plan at the end of the year. If I just go on now to the forecasts, so this is what we're looking to update from a bottom-up position based on month 9 for tomorrow's board, so we can get a good view of where we think we're going to be. But as at month 8, you can see that in Lough's case, whilst the best case is that there is a route back to plan, the likely scenario is a 21 million variance, and a downside is a 43 million variance. Liverpool Women, similarly, best case is actually to overachieve plan by around about £300,000, but we are predicting to hit plan on our mid case, and downside is around about 2 million. And Liverpool Heart and Chest, similarly, best case around £700,000 better to plan, mid case to hit plan, and a £1 million downside. So that's the analysis that we do each month. The next slide just tells you what's constituents, components of those forecasts, and basically each one of them is based on the CIP and our delivery risk assessments of that, and then any known adjustments that we know coming up in the last quarter of the year, including grip and control impacts, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Just go on to the next slide. This was the work we did with Luft. As you know, that was one of our commissioned partnership pieces of work, and they worked with us to take a prudent assessment of where we were at for around about month 7, which took our position down to its worst case, if you like, and then built back up based on what we expected by the end of the year. And not coincidentally, that coincides with our £21 million assessment. That we presented that to the FPRM meeting last month, and we said we would go away and do this further review to see if we could get any further benefits by the next time we meet, which is next week. So what I've just got a couple more summary slides which I'll conclude on, and then what my intention was to hand over to the sites who will take you through the constituent forecasts and the actions and mitigations that are happening as we speak. But just in terms of a summary for Luft, so Luft does remain on plan despite all the challenges, excluding DSF at month 8. £8.5 million variance is solely due to the withholding of deficit support funding. We do have a delivery risk of £21 million based on our mid case. Drivers remain pay, offset slightly by overperformance on income, albeit that continues to be a conversation with the ICB. We're awaiting a formal letter from them that was due last week and is due this week, but we've not received yet. We'll perhaps talk a little bit more about that in a sec. And it includes balance sheet releases to date of just shy of £80 million. Our mitigations to deliver the risk remain, the primary source remains delivery of CIP and control of our spend, with all the control measures you'll see shortly. But we do continue to look at all actions, not least vacancy restrictions. Where we can, we're still pursuing ward closures, although obviously we're in the middle of winter and it's the pressures are seasonal, and we're looking to accelerate any of the commercial items that we can in year, although a lot of those now look like they're going to be in earnest next year. The risks remain CIP slippage and the income over performance. Myself and James met with the ICB before Christmas. We've met with the ICB contracts wise post Christmas. The view is that they likely will pay up to month 9, They've got a couple of queries on some of the coding, but their initial stance was that they want us to pare back Q4 back to plan. So in other words, not overperform for the last 3 months of the year. Now, we've not had that formally yet, and contrary and separate to that verbal instruction, over the past few days, we've received a separate request from Region to actually do more activity to improve performance targets, which has come straight from number 10, I understand. So there's a bit of a contrary verbal direction we're getting, but we have not had the letter from the ICB. If we just move on to the next one, the summary for Liverpool Women's and Heart and Chest, I think the key summary there is we're on plan and we're forecasting to hit plan in our likely case. There continues to be lots of work to be done. We're applying grip and control initiatives that we find in Luft across the group as quickly as we can to get that standardized approach. But overall, the risk is significantly less in those two organisations. So I was going to pause there and hand over to site forecasts and recovery items, David, but happy to take any questions if you prefer now.
Thank you, Rob. Let's pause and just take any reflections or questions on the overall position, and then we'll come on to the sites, if that's all right, Rob.
Yeah.
Anything? David, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Rob. Very clear presentation. And it's only a relatively small thing in the great scheme of things, but when are we expecting to hear the outcome of the VAT claim?
Well, I mean, it's probably, I'd describe it a bit more than small, actually, Dave, but because we've got 14 million as kind of a likely, hopefully a likely outcome. Their governance committee was supposed to be meeting last week. I don't know whether it was the start or the end of last week, and we were waiting to hear. I've got a call with the VAT advisors later on, but I know the answer. We've not heard back yet, David, but it's hopefully any time soon. Now, whether that hearing back will be a definitive, here's our decision, or we want you to do more work, remains to be seen, but we should hear back in the next days.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Sue, please.
Thank you, David. Just a couple of things. There's a lot in there. I'm going to throw out a few points, but some of these points I can take offline if it'd be more helpful. So the deficit support funding, I understand that's a system issue. What is the likely outcome there? Do you think it's going to be sort of just withdrawn completely, or do you think there'll be some kind of settlement in, agreement in Q4 that's just really critical to where we land? I'll just throw these points out, and you can answer whichever order or whichever point you wish to address. Headcount. Obviously, we had a target of reducing headcount by about 1,100, and reading the papers, we're currently it's about just under 300. Just wanted to, and pay is our biggest sort of variance, and contributing to the potentially not hitting the target. Cash. We have 1 day of cash, which it's a concern, which I'm stating the obvious. But as a board, obviously you're making your applications. As a board, we have a responsibility to ensure the organisation has adequate cash flow, and we're managing this on a day-to-day. And I know that's out of our hands because of the deficit support funding, but it concerns me as a board. We're facing this ongoing situation, and it's just hand to mouth, as a note. So I just wondered whether you could comment on that. So finally, just around the over-performance issue. You said you're going to get clarity in the next couple of days as to whether more activity will be required or whether we have to reduce activity. If we are required to reduce activity and stay within the contract agreement, what is the impact likely to be on our outcome? And sorry, very final comment is we're on target, which is great to hear, subject to the deficit support funding. However, we are anticipating the CIP slippage. Presumably that's all reflected in that 21 million outcome at the end of the year. With the fact that we're so behind on the pay and the headcount reduction, I was just wondering how we are squaring the circle on that by sort of just achieving a deficit of 21 potentially, if I've read that correctly. So those are my general points. Happy to take some of those offline.
Okay, well, I'll address them briefly, Sue, if that's all right, David, and then
Yes.
Okay, so deficit support funding, I don't know. The latest letter we received from Region Finance Director last week, I think was described as green shoots of improvement, but didn't give them the confidence to release the deficit support funding. I mean, it is interesting because the system even has been on plan for Q2 and Q3. I've not seen the final numbers for Q3, but I believe it will be. So it's interesting. So I don't know, but that would be a clear variance, kind of out of our control to some extent. So if they decide not to pay that out at all, then I think the 44 million that I described, that would be a recognised variance out of our control, albeit their argument would be, well, it's caused by the fact that you're off plan. But I don't know. So we continue to lobby to get that back. I know that nationally they've talked about potentially taking it. I don't think there's many systems not earning it, or it's not been released, but there has been some talk of where that is the case, then redistributing it to those who have. We'll see. In terms of headcount, absolutely, you are correct. That is our biggest driver. As you know, we have plans to continue to shut capacity in particular, and we have achieved some success there through the year, but not to the extent that we wanted. So it continues to be a challenge. What we have seen actually is some slight improvement in month 9, further improvement, which is good, particularly considering that there was the strikes as well. So, but nevertheless, we continue to be significantly off plan there, and it's something we need to consider as we get into next year. And one of those key considerations clearly is the corporate service TOMs, which will have an impact, hopefully, of reducing some of the headcounts. But it's the clinical areas that you observe is where we're overspending the most. In terms of cash, so I actually saw the national the recording of the national board meeting, and it was confirmed by Elizabeth and Jim that that they are protecting organisations so that they can pay payroll and pay suppliers. But they acknowledge that they're putting in stringent rules. The year-end, the month-end position is the lowest we get, because it's where we've paid out payroll, we've paid the supplier runs, and we've not yet been paid for the month ahead from the ICB. So that's kind of our lowest point. But it is a real burden on us applying for that distress cash. So we've just applied for £23 million through that route through January, and we'll hopefully know in the next few weeks whether we're successful in that. The region have supported it actually, so we'll see. In terms of the performance and activity, the overperformance has been running at oscillating from about £800,000 million a month. So that would be an impact that we would need to that we would lose from an income perspective if we went back to plan. But on the other side, Beth and the team put the application in at the region's request for the additional activity, which is about £3 million worth of income. Now that all wouldn't be bottom line, there'd be some costs associated, but nevertheless you can see the range there. So it's kind of like a £5 million range just in that alone, depending what they ask us. They'll need to be definitive on this, not least before next Tuesday when we're at FPRM, I believe, in front of Stephen Hay, because it's been an action item that we've been trying to resolve for some time now. And then the final point on the forecast, does it include the CIP position? Yes, it does. So it takes the mid case excludes red CIP schemes and takes ambers at 50% and greens at 75%. So there's a delivery risk built in there.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, please.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Rob. Rob, I've just been trying to, just on a kind of very big picture basis, just been trying to do a bit of a counterfactual and thinking, where would we have been had we not done things that we've done? And if I said to you, what are the three most influential trends, most influential decisions that we've taken over the last quarter that have got us to this position, what would you say are the three most influential trends and drivers that we've engaged with?
So in terms of benefiting us, Mike, do you mean, or the things that we've...
Either way, the things that either have led to an improved performance or the things that we just haven't got to and intended to get to.
So I think capacity would be the first one, and that as a double barrel, because you remember the first quarter we started on the back foot because we still had winter capacity open. So we had at least 2 wards, and there were various other pockets as well, and corridor care open at the start of the year that was unbudgeted. So that gave us a back foot. But then we had the positive engagement of working on the non-elective flow work that the team had done, and those shoots of recovery of no criteria to reside coming down, which did enable some capacity to be shut, and that has an impact on spend. So that's a beneficial. But then on that same theme, we're now back into winter and are opening up capacity, and corridors are full again, and again to keep people safe, that has a clear staffing requirement. So I think that's number one. Number two would be on the head count. You can see, as painful as it's been, the vacancy control in admin areas in particular has had an impact, and we continue, and you can see the so corporate areas overall are above CIP plan. They've hit their plan for the end of the year. It's been really painful, but it's enabled us to achieve a financial target, and it's set us up for some of the target operating model work, I think. So that's been good. And then the third thing I think is the activity performance, where we have continued to try and meet our national targets. we had premium spend mandatedly taken off us, so we've had to bear some of that burden, but we've kept up the activity subject to that being challenged now. But I think that's important. I think the area where we've honestly not really embraced fully is the productivity. So if you look at our metrics, we have in specialties, we have significant opportunities to still go at, and that has to be our focus going forward. I think that'd be my three.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Jackie, then Jeffrey, please.
Thank you. So I'm just interested. I know we've not finished. We've got 76 days to go this year, but can you confirm that we've started the work ready for the 1st of April for next 26-27 CIP work?
I can, Jackie. We had, you remember, just before Christmas, we submitted that 3-year plan to CGIM and Penny Dash and NHSE, Great and the Good, and that had a section showing the CIP areas of focus, the preliminary, not the PIDs, but the pre-PIDs. And what we've got to do actually for the next formal NHSE submission on the 12th of February is have PIDs fully developed for at least 50% of the CIP scheme. So we're on with that. We're trying to do that alongside other work, and that's run through the TDU and in the sites, and we've got some owners and SROs. So there's lots of work to do over the next three weeks, and we're working with PwC on it. But we're further ahead than we have been in the past.
Thank you. That's great.
Jeffrey, please.
Thank you. Looking at the cash in the bank, and we're living hour by hour, it seems to me, not day by day, at 2 of our organisations. Is there any risk that we wouldn't be able to pay our suppliers on time?
Well, I mean, we, as part of our cash management process, we look at we look to maintain to pay suppliers that, but we're also we also manage our cash where we can. So I can't say that there's never a risk given the level, but at the moment we're continuing to do that. And as I do say, the end of the month is the lowest point in the cycle. So, you know, for example, we've had the payment this month, so our cash balance is significantly higher at this point in time, which is ahead of the supplier runs this month. So at this month in time, we are continuing to pay suppliers for the better practice payment code that we follow.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Look, the remaining period of this year is clearly vital in determining whether we can demonstrate significant progress in managing our financial position or not. And we have to do, and this is tomorrow's discussion, we have to be sure we're doing everything we can to maximise our position and improve on a likely case of -21. Now, you can read the report, but you can get out of bed on the right side in the morning, read the report and conclude we're ahead of where we need to be on CIP, we're on plan, we are we've got further things that will happen in the remainder of the year, we're taking good advice, so on and so forth, positive. You can get out of bed on the left side in the morning and see no significant change in pay run rate, no significant material change in headcount. Only 48% of the CIPs are recurring, and we've got HMRC will keep deliberating, and we've got -40. You can easily paint different scenarios on all of this, and inevitably it's part of their job. Those holding us to account and commentating on our performance and so on will inevitably highlight the more negative scenario. So we can't juggle with the spectrum. Is almost, we could have a really good year of progress, or we could have a year in which we significantly go backwards within the spectrum of things that Rob's described. And the pressure's high, the stakes are high for us all on this corporately, and we need, in the Lough position, to do better. I'm worried about going into next week's poking with PwC and other colleagues with the same forecast that we had last time, and if we've been unable to improve that. So we need to do everything we can on a day-by-day basis to get to the best position we can. We are in a precarious position. I think it's best now, Rob, if we get into some of the depth on the site reports that you say and help us get an understanding of the challenges of CIP delivery and headcount reduction. Are you going to steer us through the order for this, please?
Yeah, I think colleagues have got the slide on their forecast again. This is a month 8 one, and reminding that we've over the last couple of days almost like done a bottom up, ask the sites to have a look at bottom up realistically where can we get to, and they'll talk to it, but we've also included, just for assurance purposes, some of the grip and control levels of detail, not to necessarily talk through, but to show you an illustration of trying to do everything we can feasibly do between now and the end of the year. So I was just going to hand over to Exec MD, if that's okay.
Yeah,
David.
all fine.
Okay, I think that's first.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Rob, are you in chat? Thank you. Okay, so from a Royal perspective, year to date we've got a £12.2 million away from plan. That was to month 8. Within that, just touching on the CIP, because the main challenge within that 12.2 million at the Royal is an underachievement of the CIP plan. So within the 12.2 year to date, 8 million of that is being driven by underachievement of CIP. We've transacted 16 million year to date, and from a full year effect that will become 22 million recurrent CIP, but that is about 8 million pounds short recurrently of what our CIP target was for the site. So within the 12.2 million year to date, about 8 million is CIP, and the other about 3.8 million is in relation to what Rob referred to around the premium costs. So you'll remember at the Royal we were spending about 500,000 a month on premium costs, and we had the budget removed at the beginning of the year as part of the planning ask. What we have seen, just touching on that, in month 9, and I'm expecting it to continue, is we've managed to bring that £500,000 run rate cost of activity down to nearer 300,000. So when I come onto the Royal report, you'll see a lot of that was driven by gastroenterology and neurology, and we approved business cases throughout this year to expand the workforce. We've now fully recruited into gastroenterology. So all those lists we were providing across the Broad Green Endoscopy Unit and the Royal on premium cost are now being substantively staffed, and we've seen in month 9, aligned to our trajectories, that the WLI cost in gastroenterology has come down by over 100,000 in month, and we're forecasting that now to continue. So just touching on the forecast, so 12.2 million year to date, and our mid-case forecast is to get to 15.7 million by the year end. I've been through that in detail, updated that based on the month 9 position, and that is where we are expecting to land. So just running through that, I suppose when we touch on the risks for the Royal, I won't go over it again, but it's absolutely linked to Rob's earlier discussion on the income. There is a large amount of income over performance in the Royal, and that was also factored into our CIP. So it plays into where we're now forecasting some underperformance on CIP, depending on what the outcome is with the Commissioner discussions. The other risk to us at the minute is the escalation. So in our forecast, we didn't account for getting any winter pressure funding, and we have tried to limit the escalation costs. but particularly through the second half of December and the first 2 weeks of January, we did have to put some additional support in because we were seeing increased pressures on the site. We're trying to minimise that as much as possible, but obviously there is ongoing winter pressures that we're dealing with. The actions, just to give some assurance, so back to the grip and control, the main financial recovery plan that we put in place at the Royal was clearly based on the grip and control actions that we cited you all on in previous months, and we're being supported with PwC. I am chairing the weekly financial recovery group. I do that every Friday, and I then report that into James's overarching group financial recovery group meeting. Every week, the divisions are now using the dashboards that we have around workforce. You'll see on, Rob, if you don't mind just going, sorry, to the next slide. You'll see on the tracker, each scheme that is within the grip and control sheet, we are tracking weekly, and I have that at a divisional and down to a ward and departmental level. A lot of these schemes from a Royal perspective, so if I just touch on a couple of them to give you an example, overtime ban, we are using no overtime at the Royal apart from in the dialysis units. We're taking the dialysis team through a workforce change that will be complete by the end of January, and then there will be absolutely no overtime in use at the Royal. We've seen non-clinical bank absolutely reduce as well, and again we're forecasting, I think it's from February, to have no non-clinical bank unless it is to cover things like the ED reception or ward clerk sickness. We wouldn't be using planned non-clinical bank. The couple I just want to highlight, just because they're the most significant things on this, is so vacancy freeze. You'll see on my risk register when we come to it, we've enacted a full non-clinical vacancy freeze. There are some risks with that, which we are managing the best we can, but you'll see that's green on there because we have identified a number of posts. So we've frozen sort of 9 posts that were planned to go out in Q4, and we stopped those going out, which it shows there is an estimated 68k saving. The bit that we're still really working on at the Royal is the fill rates. So we've enacted everything we can on that, and I'm tracking that weekly with the nurses, and I've got sight of that every week at a ward level. From a registered nursing perspective, we are within the 100% and we are achieving what we need to, but there still remain challenges on the healthcare assistance due to the observations and the acuity of the patients. Now, one of the things I'm sure you would ask me, because I've asked the teams, is our not meeting criteria to reside has come down, and I would expect reduced, because previously we've talked about, haven't we, lots of level 3 EMI care patients, and I would be expecting the HCA special obs to be coming down too. We have identified a particular issue with mental health patients and mental health delays that are staying in our bed base. That is across the Royal and Aintree, and I'm going to be when James is back, we're just going to be picking up with James around a conversation with Merseycare, because I think at the minute we have a lack of shared care policy and protocol with Merseycare around supporting either the special obs on the wards or supporting the costs of those patients. So that's a general theme we're picking up. So I won't go through each of these in detail. It's very similar across Royal and Aintree, the governance we've put in place. But I'm receiving, as I say, you can see in the KPI column, I've got those KPIs by ward, department up to divisional level, and I'm tracking that weekly. PwC are sitting on these meetings with me as a critical friend and providing challenge or support where they can each week. And we're really starting to track, as Rob said, early signs of run rate improvement in month 9, particularly across our WLIs and our agent bank and agency usage from a nursing perspective, but obviously much further to go. Rob, I'll stop there unless there's any particular questions.
Okay, I think Aintree.
Let's bring Tom in on that point, please. Tom.
Thank you, David and Natalie. Can I ask a general question about the staffing? Because our failure to reduce our headcount has been our big problem in the budget. And looking at the figures, where we've saved staff, whole-time equivalents has been admin and in management. But every time you look at clinical, we've either maintained or increased our clinical staffing. And if you look at agency rates and bank rates, they've flatlined for some time. Is what we're hearing from the sites that we've really gone as low as we can in clinical staffing without compromising patient care, and that to think we're going to get further whole-time equivalent savings is unrealistic?
So what I would say on that, Tom, is I feel confident in the controls and the oversight we've got in place currently, but there's two big things. So if we maintain the level of beds we have at the minute on open at the site, from a nurse staffing perspective, we are staffing it appropriately for those patients. But we do not have safe care. So what I would say is, and that is being rolled out throughout January at the Royal. So from a nurse staffing perspective, it is still quite an individual professional view. And I think safe care is going to give us a much better evidence-based acuity tool, which may hopefully help us review that staffing and move it more fluently. So I think that will help with nursing. What we need to do then, what PwC have shown us in our recovery plan is we can make length of stay savings. And I think we need to do that. We'll have to do that through changing pathways, working with our clinical teams. But if we could close capacity, we absolutely could remove staff. The next one is around when you look at our productivity measures, if we keep doing everything the way we're doing it, we keep the outpatient model the same, we keep all the pathways the same, then we need the level of staff we've got. But what GIRFT, Model Hostel, etc. are telling us is we need to work with our clinicians and we need to change our service provision, then we can remove the staff. So I think why we're struggling at the minute, Tom, is if we keep in our current model, we're getting it, the feeling is, and from the controls I'm seeing and monitoring, we aren't going to see massive staffing improvements. But what the focus needs to be, and that's where Jackie's question about next year's CIP plans is, we're going to have to change those pathways and reduce the capacity, and then we can pull the staff in.
Thank you.
Sue, please.
Yeah, can I just ask a question about the no criteria to reside and the length of stay, which is, they're sort of connected, aren't they? Great to hear about the progress we've made to date and the work you're doing with Merseycare. This is one of our biggest sort of challenges as an organisation. What other steps are being taken to try and reduce that no criteria to reside, to make sort of further inroads in there, which will then sort of also, you know, have an impact on the length of stay of some of the patients?
Yeah, so just do an update on no criteria to reside, and you'll see it in the IPRs. So even though we're in the most pressured winter period, we have maintained the progress we've made, and on yesterday's data we haven't seen that increase over Christmas and New Year, so that's positive. We're stable. The next steps are really embedding the weekend discharges, so the Saturday Sunday profile, and also there are the 50 care home beds profile to open across Liverpool back from the end of, I think it's third week of January through to March, and that should really support our level 3 capacity, which is our most complex patients. So they're over the next couple of months, Sue, they're the two big schemes, is the weekend discharges to patients going home and getting the extra capacity. We also have got the palliative care beds opening over at Liverpool Heart and Chest on the 19th of January, because at the minute we're keeping a lot of patients that are end of life who would have transferred out of hospital. So they're the three big things for the next 3 months.
No, that's good to hear. Thank you.
And David, sorry, David and Sue, I got the order wrong there. David next.
No worries, ladies first. It's fine. The report you've taken us through, Natalie, is really encouraging, and it gives us confidence that we are making progress on these areas. But a couple of things that aren't mentioned here, and it might link in with Tom, your answer to Tom about clinical pathways. I was really surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been, but I was really surprised when I read the PwC report that suggested we're right off our peer group as far as theatre productivity and outpatient follow-ups are concerned. Are those areas that we're targeting site by site to look at how we can improve productivity there?
Absolutely. So at the FRG, David, a week or two ago, we went through that with PwC, and at the minute we're getting the next step is PwC are pulling all that information together for us at a specialty level, and we're holding workshops. We're going to do it across site actually, so we'll hold a cardiology workshop, a gastro one, and we are going to go through the top hitters. So where are those metrics the most stark? What would our improvements be? And you'll see when we present next year's CIP plans, they will be the key schemes on our CIP plans, but we need those owned clinically at a specialty level, and that's what Pete and I are working with the teams at the minute to establish.
Thank you. It's great news.
And Jim, please.
Yeah, David, I just want to give a little bit more detail for Sue around some of the other activities around reducing length of stay. And there's perhaps two to mention in addition to those that Nat said, Sue. One is one good way to reduce length of stay is not to admit people in the first place. And so a lot of the activity that we're engaging more and more in is out of hospital, ambulance diversions, for example. And I think, candidly, there's a lot more to do in that space in terms of the out of hospital pathway. So we're doing quite a lot of work with Merseycare in particular to try and improve that. It's called the single point of access. And monitoring the number of transfers that the paramedics from NWAS are making. NWAS transmit proportionally a higher number of patients to REDs than in other parts of the Northwest. So there's room for manoeuvre in that space, and we're engaging more and more in that. The other one actually is a piece of very good news for us is the introduction of another Da Vinci robot just before Christmas, and length of stay for the urological procedures that are undertaken using the Da Vinci goes down. So we get better outcomes and shorter length of stay. So that is, from a clinical perspective, a really good piece of news. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. That's great. Sue, did you want to come back? Yeah.
No, that's really good. There's lots of initiatives that are going on, and that will impact on activity and productivity going forward, and you know, our financial performance. So no, that's really, really helpful. It'd be good to sort of, you know, perhaps at some point see a, you know, a plan, a strategy in terms of what are we doing sort of, you know, the next 12 months to maintain that sort of momentum to get the length of stay down, and because it's about embedding things and working with our system partners and doing things in the community, etc. So yeah, it'd be good to sort of maintain a focus on that as a board. Thank you.
Agree. Thank you. Back to you, Rob.
Yeah, I think it's Aintree next, which is
Okay,
Shahida. That's
over to you, please. Yeah.
Thank you. So overall, at the end of November, Aintree were 10.2 million overspent. The main driver for Aintree is pay costs, predominantly associated with escalation capacity that we've had open at the beginning of the year, but also recently as well. Quite a significant challenge within our escalation capacity. Year to date, we've probably spent in the region of about 1.4 million if you sum up from the beginning of the year to now. Our income position is positive within the forecast. We're assuming 5 billion of overperformance, bearing in mind what Rob said in terms of the considerations that now the ICS have put in place. In terms of CIP, we've delivered quite a strong position, 20 million against a target of 2.2, so an underperformance of 2.5 million. With an in-year effect of 27 million, and we're currently 19 million. We had progressed quite well in terms of headcount reduction at the beginning of the year, but having to open up the additional capacity in winter, that has mitigated some of that positive position. As shown in the mid-case forecast, we were at the end of November forecasting 14 million. December has been a good position for us, and so we don't envisage the mid-case deteriorating significantly, if at all, as we progress into the last quarter. Similar as Nat detailed for the Royal, we have also got a recovery plan in place. There are a couple of things that will mitigate our overall position now that we've had confirmation, particularly with the Warrington Mid Cheshire additional work over and above the ICS contract. And apologies for a transposition error. It says in the top line 0.2 million. It's actually 2 million that we're expecting to deliver from that additional work for Warrington Mid Cheshire. Discussions are progressing very positively in the right direction with Dumfries and Galloway to undertake some additional activity for them. That is, we're planning, if that all goes according to agreements that we're progressing quite closely now, that should hopefully progress from February. So they're two things that are helping support the position going forward. There are risks within that position. Winter is the biggest pressure for us. we are currently managing within that. And when we come to the IPR, I will discuss through where we are in terms of ED. And again, just going into the next slide on there, where we've got the detailed work plan in terms of the recovery. As Nat had said, the governance we've got quite similar to, if not exactly the same as the Royal Peak chairs, the weekly Aintree Recovery Board, which feeds into the FPG that James chairs on the Tuesday. And you can see there we've got some schemes there that we probably slightly scored differently from the other side in terms of we were looking at the finances as opposed to, I think, the process. The processes are all 100% in place. And I can report that the scheme that is red on there, which is the non-clinical medical agency, we have got challenges within theatres and crit care, but as of the discussions we had yesterday, we do think that will be a blue scheme, because we've got plans in place to mitigate those pressures where we have got agency. In terms of recruitment, that's blue. We've transacted that. We are holding posts. We have got a risk, but it's a very informed decision with our clinical medical director and nurse director on holding those posts. So every post that is held has that QIA and EIA. So there's quite a lot of depth and detail within that. We are meeting with our so we've got ownership within the wider SLT and within the divisional and ward colleagues to support the recovery plan. So happy to take any questions on the Aintree position.
Thank you. Any specific questions on the Aintree position? Okay, Sue, you're still confusing me with the hand. Do you want, are you coming on? No, okay, thank you. All right, well done, Shida. Let's move on. DTC.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So for the DTC, up to month 8, we were 1 million away from plan. Income is up and pay is better than plan, but there has been an impact on non-pay with the activity that we're delivering. CIP is the main driver for us being behind plan, but forecasting to the end of year, we are forecasting delivery of 7.23 million, and that will include the pharmacy gain share, which you'll see at the bottom, the mitigations to achieve plan. So that's 6% of our cost base. We have 63 schemes for CIP, and 97% of them are blue and green, so we don't envisage any risk to delivery. In terms of the forecast, you will see in terms of the best and mid case that they both include, you can see risk to mid-case delivery. It does include just short of £1 million of challenging decisions, which we did put forward, but has been included in our position. But they are things that will be have to be negotiated with primary care, because it's about switching off some tests. So they're not all things that are within our gift. However, they are factored into our position. What I would say, though, is it won't leave us a gap, because the pharmacy gain share is not included in that best and mid case. We have put a lot of grip and control around our spend, and I'm pleased that the run rate position has come down over the last couple of months. And with that pharmacy gain share, the summary is that we are forecasting to achieve our plan for the year end. So if you just go to the next one, Rob, please. So we are on track with a lot of the grip and control. I will not repeat what Nat and Shahida have said. We have robust governance in place weekly to go through, whether it be spend, the CIP tracking of delivery. So that is delivering the improvements that we planned. So I'll stop there and I will take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good position. Any questions? Okay, let's press on. Broad Green, please.
Morning all, and thanks, Chair. So for the Broad Green position, you can see it on screen. Our plan was a 9.1 million deficit. You can see the best case, mid case and worst case on the screen. For Broad Green, comparative to a couple of the other sites, it's mainly focused on failed CIP. So big schemes related to ward closures, managed service from a procurement element. So our focus as a site is to really look at putting additional schemes or mitigating some of those cost pressures. We've very much focused on doing those weekly grip and control elements, and you'll see that in the subsequent slides. But as I said, the focus for me is how do we put additional schemes in and around mitigating the ones that have failed previously. One of the things that Rob mentioned at the beginning of the meeting was around winter pressures. So instead of opening up an additional ward on the Broad Green site, what we have done is consolidate a ward. That means that we've been able to reduce the cost pressure, but that is currently not in the forecast because we were expecting potential income supported from the ICB. Procurement wise, we've had some good meetings over the last 2 weeks around what additional schemes they can put in place to replace some of the previous ones. So we're hoping really to look at improving the worst case and mid case. It's unlikely we'll hit the best case at this stage for Broad Green. Those are probably the key things I wanted to highlight on the Broad Green position, but I am very conscious it's subtly different to the Royal and Aintree overall.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay. Presentation, any questions? Sue, please. No?
Yes, sorry, sorry, David.
That's all right.
Just you mentioned, Jonathan, the failed SIP schemes a couple of times. Can you just sort of elaborate on that in terms of, was it in the planning? Was it on the implementation?
So the two biggest schemes on the CIP tracker were a closure of an additional ward on the Broad Green site, partly linked to Norton criteria to reside, but also partly linked to flow and A&E pressures, which, as you can hear from the other sites, the flow and pressure hasn't reduced, and we've had to use those beds in and around supporting those pressures. The secondary one was around looking at a managed service in theatres, and that was about 600k. That hasn't been able to get off the ground. We are hopeful to try and look at that going into the next financial year, but it's unlikely we will deliver it in this year. So we're looking at any other procurement schemes that can mitigate that 600k as well. So those two together, 600k and 950k, are our biggest element of pressure on the Broad Green financial plan.
Okay, thank you. That's very clear.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Sue. Rob, back to you.
Great. So I think conclusion there, David. Hopefully you can see that the level of detail that we go into. We've got a consistent approach across the sites, consistent and in-depth governance at site, and then through the financial recovery group that James chairs on a Tuesday, or myself, and you know, it's a enhanced position, but we have to recognise that Q4 gets harder, and that's twofold, not least because of the late stretch that was put into Q4. So but we signed up to it and we recognise it, so we're working towards it. But that's the part of the reason why we're on track as at month 9, month 8 and going into month 9, but then that doesn't necessarily equate to a year-end position of the same, because it gets harder. The last bits I'll just rattle through for completeness. If these are the PwC actions that come out of the financial plan recovery meetings. The main ones relate to, can we conclude the legal issue and overperformance? We've talked about overperformance. We're waiting for a letter, and we've got this mixed message from the regional ask now. The legal issue, again, we met with ICB. Our position remains the same. It's in the contract. We suggested an approach that they could take. What the ICB have done is pass that back to region for a conclusion. Again, we wait to hear. We were asked to respond on the revised forecast outturn. So following board tomorrow, we'll provide an update ahead of next Tuesday as to where we currently are predicting. The balance sheet review, again, we await to see the final assessment from PwC, but good and bad news. The idea that they promoted of tens of millions of pounds worth of opportunity is not valid, and the largest scheme about relifing assets that had already been fully written down, I think they now have concluded is also not valid, but we're waiting to get that in writing, which is good that we were correct in the first place, but is disappointing because we of course would have taken the opportunity were it genuine. And then in terms of the other two items, we just had to confirm the positions on Liverpool Women's and Heart and Chest, and there is a potential upside on both, but that doesn't make it any easier to achieve, and probably some additional risks are being added as we split out some of the costs of PwC. So but we will confirm that we'll at least hit plan. And then finally, we need to clarify the outstanding issues relating to regulatory undertakings. I understand that a letter has gone back to the region this week, which is going back this week on our position on those undertakings. So that's our summary on the PwC actions, David, and then we'll move on to section 3 if you choose. And then just very briefly, just concluding on the PwC partnership. As you know, we had 3 financial projects. One was the in-year financial recovery plan. That was done and is included in the appendix. We presented it at the FPRM to PwC and region last time. It aligns to our 21 million, but we are still working with PwC to ensure that anything more we can do in year we do. Sorry. And then the second item was the 3-year financial recovery plan. Again, that was complete and submitted to NHSE on the 19th of December, as you know, and that was in line with the NHSE submission on the 17th also. We talked about that, so that's complete. And then the third item was the drivers of the deficit, which again was complete and has been shared with colleagues. And that report identified structural issues of circa 81 million and 12 million at Luft and Liverpool Women's respectively. So largely complete, but ongoing work with the financial recovery plan, and as I mentioned earlier, working now with that team to help us complete the PIDs to the required standard by early February. So I'll leave it there, David.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. It's very clear. And as I said earlier, but to be continued in the discussion, more of a forward look in terms of where we're at now. For the remainder of the year and into next year will come tomorrow. Thank you, Rob and colleagues, for all of that.
Thank you.
I think Heather's here now. We're going to talk to us about the sickness absence deep dive work.
Thank you, Chair. So in your pack, you have a short slide deck, which I don't propose to go through, but just to give you the headlines and and how we came to carry out the deep dive. Looking at sickness absence has been one of our responses to the people metrics within the segmentation work. When you look at the people metrics, sickness absence is a driver, not least the rate of sickness absence, but actually the approach to it through how we see that coming out through the staff survey. So it's a really important thing that we understand what those drivers are. It's been very much, this piece of work has been led by the site teams, so the site directors of people and their heads of people. And they've taken a QI approach to looking at, what are the determinants, what are those drivers that actually creating a sickness absence rate for across group. It is a group piece of work. And particularly given the demographic that we have within our region, looking at some of those social determinants of sickness that we see in our workforce. They've also looked at the challenges that we have in managing absence, and you'll see from the report that they are sort of split down into 4 key areas. One of the first things is around data and systems and the lack of real-time data, but also the lack of a case management system that would help us really keep on top of managing absence, especially for our line managers. Leadership training and culture is another challenge that we have. There's capability and risk appetite predominantly in there, and the culture that we have around absence. You'll see in the report that we have currently 88 people across the 2 big acute sites of group, whereby they are waiting a final 3rd level hearing in terms of managing their absence, and that is not it's not a good place to be in terms of our timeliness and how we can actually how we're actually managing absence at the moment. Workforce wellbeing, mentioned, is another key determinant and a challenge for us. We live in one of the most deprived areas, as we know, and that is reflected in the complexity of the sickness cases that we see from our own workforce, and that is just getting more and more, especially the mental health complexities that we see and we manage. And then finally, the area of policy, which we know that by managing tightly and paying attention to policy, we can bring down sickness absence. There is lots of work going on nationally and regionally around looking at different ways of applying policy. National team looking at more of a holistic, person-centred approach to managing absence, as opposed to looking at hardline triggers, which tend to just push up it doesn't seem to bring down sickness absence over the years that has been applied. So we are very much mindful and involved. One of our directors of people is actually leading, co-chair of the national policy work on sickness absence. Other factors that that we are aware of and we know, and we've been very open about, is the challenges around our own structures and the capacity that we have in the people and OD function to actually put in that more low-level support. We've been carrying vacancies for the best part of 12 months now in the team, and that has an impact over time. Clearly, it is line managers that manage sickness absence, not HR advisors, but we know that they play an absolute key role in making sure that those policy triggers and the policy is applied to and managers are supported. I'll come on to what we're doing about that as I move forward. I have highlighted that there are 54 risks associated with absence. They're not purely absence. Some of them are, but they're not purely absence, and the majority of them are site-based risks, and they will bubble up through the site reports that we see through ARC. So I'm not intending to go through those risks, because they will bubble up if they get to 12, and they're usually around really sort of tricky services that aren't resilient in terms of staffing, and when people go off sick, then it creates issues. We've seen that recently this week in terms of some of our catering and estate staff, where just the next person going off sick makes a big difference to the risk that you're carrying. The slide deck was discussed in detail this week at the Group Senior Management Board, and there is a commitment from across the group, both executive and hospital leadership teams, to have absence as a priority programme of work, and we're going to adopt that improvement methodology, which we've already started to do. We're going to lead this corporately. Spoke to Tim this morning about how we can make sure it's managed corporately, but actually the work needs to get done at site, because that's nearest to where the actual absence is taking place. So how we actually create individual improvement focus at site level, but overseen at group. Our immediate focus will be to address those 88 backlog of people who are through process and no fault of their own and through timing have been delayed, and we need to actually make sure that we are managing those in the most pragmatic way. And we are working with that with the directors of people and the trade unions. Of course, the trade union capacity and this policy is a really tight one in terms of the trade union capacity and their ability to actually support final sickness absence reviews. I am having we think everything crossed my target operating model for people and OD services being signed off on the 26th of January. I took the executive managing directors through it on Monday this week, and with support for the additional support that we're going to actually put into the sites to support some of that low-level casework, which particularly in the Aintree site is a slightly different structure that we're putting in place to make sure that is supported. Also looking at areas such as estates and facilities whereby we know there are high levels of low-level casework that with greater HR support we could address. We're also putting money aside and working with digital to, one of the first things we will do with the model is will be to procure a case management system, which will help us actually manage and help line managers to manage their casework in a more proactive way. We've also agreed to the 1% reduction in absence. The ICB target is by September 26. We believe that that is a really high ask, but we're going to do all we can to achieve that within the next financial year. Some of the things that we need to put in place to actually make the true cultural shift that we need to make here. This is not just about applying a policy rigidly, although that is part of it. We need to think about risk appetite for change and the way we manage absence and the way we actually decide how we apply the policy. The other thing is around our focus on well-being. Given we live in one of the most deprived areas, we need to put as much attention and effort on keeping our people well and in work as we do on managing people who are not well and not in work. So it is a cultural shift, it's a leadership shift, and it will require everybody within the organisation to take on this as a priority, which we agreed to do yesterday. So I'm going to leave it there, Chair. Happy to take any questions, but I try to keep it just to the assurance to this group that this is being looked at seriously.
Thanks, Heather. Good report. Jeffrey, please.
Thanks, Heather. And I'm offering to meet with you offline. There's a lot in this report we could actually have a conversation around and what's been there. My impression I read the report was you're almost fighting with two hands tied behind your back in a way. And I'm pleased to see you're going to have a data system that will give you real-time information, because that is crucial for both you and for the HR business partners and for staff. And it is about that culture, an attendance culture rather than an absence culture. And sometimes the trade union capacity, and I've come across that before, and sometimes it can be a tactic when you're facing an end stage interview and a review. The other thing too is that making sure when you got the data, it's that swift response to the short-term absences and having those return to work interviews that are both supportive but robust, and also early intervention on your long-term absence. What can be done either with with physiotherapy or mental health therapists that actually get people back into work, because we know that if people go on long-term sick, the moment they pass a month, it drags on from both sides. So I think there's a lot that could be done here. A lot of money could be saved as well. But I'm very happy, Heather, to have that conversation with you offline.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Tom, please, then Mike.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Heather. So this is obviously very key to our improving our productivity over the course of the next 12 months. And what I was interested in were there unusual hotspots? There are some very traditional hotspots like A&E departments for nursing, for instance, because of the pressure of the workload there. But I guess unusual hotspots might be due to local culture, because that can be quite localized, or poor management within an area. And do you have the ability to actually intervene in hotspots in that way?
Would you like me to come in now, David? Yes, we can identify those, and each of the sites there are different hotspots and different reasons, different staff groups. consistently it's healthcare support workers, estates, crit care, ED, which you would expect, Tom. But there will be specific wards that will have really high absence levels, and it will be driven through various reasons. So yeah, the sites all have that knowledge and that information. What holds them back is the real-time data on it, Tom. So yeah, they will be working much more focused going forward, as opposed to just blanket policies.
Mike, please.
Thank you. Maybe Minority One, I found this a bit of a frustrating read. I didn't think I thought it was just too high level. And I think if you put this paper alongside the papers we've just been looking at in terms of finance, the urgency around the grip and control, I don't think that urgency is reflected in this paper. And I think how the stuff that you've been unpacking has been really helpful. And I kind of wish that the paper had been your verbal presentation rather than the paper. The paper reads a bit kind of, well, it's in the too difficult box, or there's lots of stuff to do. We've got to get systems right before we can do things in detail. And I think there's a real urgency around this. I'd have liked to have known where the hotspots are. I'd like to have known how quickly the 88 people can reduce and what the financial implications of that. I'd have liked to have known the financial cost of the TUC under capacity and how that's impacting on our budgets. And really just that sense of, alongside the system challenges that we have, these are the things that we're actually doing on the ground to shift the needle, and these are the consistent pressures that we're putting on. And I didn't capture that kind of culture in the paper, and I think I'd have liked to have seen that, please. Thank you.
Mike, sorry,
Heather, go on.
I absolutely take that on board, Mike. And this piece of work, there is more detail to it, and we did discuss more detail yesterday at GSMB, as you would expect. So probably just pitched that wrong, Mike. Some of that we don't know yet. So this is the beginning of, the deep dive and the drivers and taking that QI approach. But we will get that information as we take this forward as an improvement program. All of it, we'll have to benchmark all that data to show that we can improve it. So I'll take that on board, Mike.
Jackie, please.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Oh, thank you. So it's really good to hear that this is a high priority, because I think there's got to be consistency across the organisation. You'll have some great places that are doing this work well, and others that don't engage in it at all. And that's what it's got to be. It's got to be that consistency. Following on from what Mike's just said, and I agree with a lot of what he said, but can we, in between meetings, get an understanding of what opportunity cost would be if we take that 1% out, and then what the opportunity cost was if we went to what the model hospital sickness and absence rates are, because I think that will give us, well, for me, it will give me a greater feeling of what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey, please.
Sorry, it's a legacy hand. I've made the points in the chat.
No problem. Thank you.
Detail would be helpful.
No worry. Yeah, great. Sue.
Just a quick point around occupational health, and if there's anything that can be done around that team to support this agenda further.
Yes, one of the things that occupational health focus on is part of the wellbeing journey, and return to work is really key, and some of that mental health support. So part of the target operating model is to look at greater psychological support and intervention, Sue, further up the pathway. So once you get somebody off sick, as Jeffrey describes, and that long-term nurse, you get stuck in that sort of pattern. So it's using that resource to help upstream to keep people well and in work. So yes, we are focusing on that.
Okay, have we got enough capacity within that team?
That has been reviewed at the moment as part of the target operating model. I don't believe we do have enough capacity from a psychological support perspective, which we are reviewing. We think we need a separate employee advisory AAP scheme, which is where people can access themselves on a more front, easy to access self self-serving sort of platform as opposed to having to go through occupational health. So there are more things that we can do, Sue, with the resource that we have. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. It could be good to see a plan for that going forward. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Beth, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I chaired the Senior Management Board, as Heather said yesterday, and I just wanted to give people kind of the reassurance, and I take on board, Michael, what you said. But what Heather's initial paper, which I think this is, it was to start the conversation, was to gain the focus and engagement of the sites, and the sites were fully engaged. And I heard in the room yesterday there is an ambition to achieve the 1% reduction, and if not further, also around giving this a higher priority. So that is also something, and that will drive out also the opportunity costs, as you said. So this is, I think, the start of a journey, but we really do need to, and there was unanimous agreement in the room that this needs to be given the focus it deserves and that priority. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. Right, so this issue of the 1% reduction as an indicator of significant progress. Of course, as Beth just said, I'm sure we're set out to do the best that we can do on this. It is, for reasons that you laid out, Heather, a significant challenge for us to improve. So I think it would be good if we just build into the regular reporting with a bit more flavour the actions that are being taken and the progress that we're making towards the reductions, as you say, and also to come back here in a few months' time with how all that's looking, Heather, when the operating model's settled and so on. Just on one point of clarification for me, on these case management systems, do people commonly have those? Is it exceptional for us not to?
It's more usual to have one than not, David. Not everybody has one, but it's more usual to have one than not.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Heather. See you next time. We're into the broader risk site reports now, and we start with DTC and Beth.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I have just given that much on finance. So the things to pull out of the report is around firstly genomics. So there's been a lot of discussion about our genomic service in LCL, and we have made the decision that the service will transfer to Manchester from the 1st of April. There was some concern whether that was a full transfer, but the summary from outcome discussions with commissioners are that it will transfer. So now we are in the process, and have been for some time, in the process of facilitating that transfer. Secondly, I will pull out, there was a health and safety inspection visit in LCL, which identified 2 areas of improvement. Corrective actions have been taken, and we have yet to receive an official formal notice. So we don't think that we will formally get an improvement notice, but we are still waiting. There is an outstanding incident at the Women's, and that involves ultrasound images. It's something that dates back to the end of 2024, but was identified as involving more patients than what originally was believed. So on identification of that, we've done an SBAR, and we are just finalising all the required actions to improve that. There are 4 risks, which are a 12 plus. I do want to point out that we've done a significant amount of work on the risk analysis within DTC, the risk profile has changed by the number of highly rated risks have reduced, but obviously that has had an impact on the number of moderate, which has increased. But I think that's the right profile that we should be seeing. There are 4, as I say, risks 12 plus. All of them are finance related. And I do want to just finish with a positive in that 3 things from reducing our risks. We have been successful in securing the funding for the automated dispensary cabinets for pharmacy, which will be rolled out at the Aintree site, and James Thompson has been really helpful in getting that over the line. The second is we have largely achieved compliance with the recommendations of the Fuller report, and that is in the mortuary. There is just one outstanding action, which is a minor amendment to the safeguarding policy, which I will be talking to David about. And finally, what was the kind of bone of contention with I'm one of the drivers for the discussions with staff side around microbiology service and the training plan has been delivered as we had set out, and the 3 locums in the DTC to support that training programme will be finishing their contract by the end of January, which will give us a financial benefit, but most importantly we have delivered the training as we set out to achieve. And that's the only things I'll pull out of the report, but happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Good questions, please. Tom, to start.
Thank you very much, Beth. So particularly I liked looking at the staff retention, which has improved enormously in LCL in the past 12 months. So congratulations to you there. I was concerned about delays in histology, which seem to be something we haven't been able to resolve for quite some time. I guess this is down to the number of histologists, histopathologists available to us. Is there anything we can do in this space? Because some of these delays look very long.
So Chair, I'll respond if that's okay. Yes, okay. So yes, Tom, it continues the challenges in histology, and that is to do with staffing. What I will say is though, we have had a particular spike in sickness absence, which has affected a lot of departments, and if you look in the IPR, the turnaround times have severely been affected. That has returned to normal. I mean, we're talking a hit virtually 50% in one department. So, and that was right across the board, that spike. There is something around the proximity in which people sit within the labs, which we are looking into as part of our deep dive into that sickness absence, and also in the improvement of the turnaround time. What I would also say is now we have the IPRs in the way that we have them, and also we have, since going into the DTC, we have a full programme of transformation programmes. And that is where we are driving the required improvements to deliver improvements against those turnaround times. But there's full visibility and there's full improvement programmes to support that now in a more formal and structured manner. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Beth. Couple of things. The genomics, is that a really good thing or is that a lost opportunity for us? And on the non-obstetric ultrasounds, how significant an issue is that, please? Thank you.
So first of all, in terms of the genomics, there have been 2 incidents within that service that have occurred, and that's been largely to do with staffing. And also there could have been improvements in process. I think there has been a lack of escalation in some of the challenges that they have encountered. If we retain that service, it will require investment, and we don't have that funding to run the service as we would need to. So I think it is a positive move that it goes to Manchester. However, there is concern, and that's why the final decision was delayed, of the tests not being done close to where obviously the patients are. And so there are some logistical detail that we need to work through the task and finish group when the service transfers to Manchester. I have put in the report, though, that some of the tests have already gone to Manchester because of the service constraints that we've faced. So some of that has already happened. So, yeah, I don't think it's something that we could have recovered, Mike.
Jim, please.
Well, I just wanted to give Mike reassurance that we look carefully at this, of course, because probably for exactly the same reason as you, were worried that we were going to lose some capacity that we would not get back, or for which there would be other collateral issues. It's part of national policy, Mike. Sue Hill, who's the national clinical scientist, has a very clear strategy around centralising the genomics elements into big machines, and the big machine for the Northwest is in Manchester. It actually is there is some debate, because the NICE guidance around, for example, hemato-oncology is about having the teams as close to the patient as possible. So this thing is in interesting tension. But our judgment, and John Brennan and I've looked carefully at this with the regional medical director, is that actually we just don't have the capacity and the resilience to do the genomics part of hemato-oncology, but we're doing all the other bits, so their service is still close. And to be honest, our assumption is that as the machines get smaller and more efficient, as in many of the technologies, something may well drift back towards Liverpool in due course. So I think it's a pragmatic decision, and it looks like our colleagues within the lab and within Beth's service are comfortable with that. So I think that's been well reasoned through. You asked the other question about the ultrasound scans, and we've been having a good look at that. The commissioners and the regulator are aware, and we are, of course, making sure that our GP colleagues are up to speed with the state of play, and have been looking at all the cases and haven't identified any cases of harm. There's been inconvenience in terms of correspondence not moving at the right rate, but we've not picked out any patient harm.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Beth. On one small point, if the piece of work you've commissioned on sickness being linked to people sitting too close to each other can also be shared with people who do the seating plan for the board meeting, that would be helpful. Thank you. I always seem to get next to a super spreader. Can we have now Liverpool Women's Management Board, please, Jenny?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I'll pull out three key issues from the Management Board to discuss with the committee. Finance, we've touched on through Rob's report, but just to bring that out a little bit more from a site perspective. As reported, the cash balance of 0.3 million was extremely low, not unexpected, but very low. And just to give some reassurance that we do look at that balance every day, we have got internal audit reports around, which are strong around our controls. So whilst that was incredibly low, we do review it on a daily basis, and we recognise the requirement for distress financing, deficit support, which continues. In terms of the forecast for the year, Rob's been through the best case and worst case, as well as the mid case with the group. But we've been through it obviously at a site level in much detail, and have high confidence levels in the delivery of the mid case. The issue that we have, particularly at Liverpool Women's, is the level of non-recurrent cost improvement programme within that delivery. Recognising that we are forecasting 3.8 million of non-recurrent cost improvement within that. However, we're also noting that there is a 7.9 million recurrent forecast in there, which is one of the largest I've ever seen at Liverpool Women's. So I think testament to the work of the plans over the last 12 months. With grip and control, PwC did a desktop review for the Poor Women's rather than the full one as referenced earlier in the meeting, but the Poor Women's has been through those recommendations and has implemented 45 of those. 13 have been partially implemented. There was one which wasn't implemented as it couldn't be in terms of the ask around run rate reduction in all recruitments. Obviously, we have plans around Birth Rate Plus and the Liverpool Neonatal Partnership, so we couldn't apply that one, and there were a number that were assessed as not applicable. But I think if we look at the fact that whilst a lot of the grip and control work has been focused on Luft, we do review that and see what more we can do to strengthen the controls here at a site level as well. We noted around the moving into next year, the challenges that we're going to have with the plan as a result of the non-recurrent delivery of the cost improvement, and that is being factored into our plans at the moment, but confident that at the moment we can and will deliver the mid-case. Moving on to cancer and elective recovery, we remain in tier 1 for both elective and cancer performance, and whilst we are seeing continued improvement in these metrics, we are behind trajectory in a number of areas in relation to the recovery plan. Cancer is showing encouraging performance, and we have reasonable confidence that with the actions that we have in place, we will deliver those targets. Elective recovery remains the biggest challenge, and whilst again we are seeing improvements, it's not at the pace that we had hoped in our recovery plan, and we are reporting behind. We know that we've got scope to do more in Q4 of the year. When we set the recovery plan, it was really as a push to get things back in place by the end of Q3. Within the resources that we were able to rally. In Q4, that performance was plateauing, but we're looking to ramp that up again, and you'll see in the report that we have got some additional funding to support that, so we can continue to do that without adversely impacting the financial position. At the end of Q3, and currently we will be going through this afternoon as the hospital leadership team group. We have done a number of scenarios in terms of where we've landed at the end of month 9, so Q3, and the options and confidence in those options for delivery at the end, by the end of Q4. We will review that and bring that analysis here when we report on month 9 next month. Probably all I was going to say around cancer and elective, and take questions on that shortly. I think it's fair to say, though, that we do remain low in terms of our national performance around RTT and 52 weeks, as has historically been the case. If we move on to CNST maternity incentive and the perinatal safety oversight report, so the CNST maternity incentive scheme compliance will be taken directly to the board tomorrow for board sign-off of the self-declaration of compliance against the 10 safety standards that we've been reviewing here at our monthly and at the HMB and in the tiers below that. We did, through the course of the year, raise 2 concerns which have been dealt with through compliance with those safety actions, and the LMNS reviewed the hospital management board's run through of the evidence and the achievement of the standards, ahead of them also observing our board tomorrow as the board goes through the self-declaration ahead of submission for assurance from the ICB and onto NHSR. So really great position to be in, the amount of work that sits behind that achievement of those standards and the impact that it does have for our ladies and our babies as well should not be underestimated. Obviously, with that comes the 10% incentive as well for the finance. From the finance point of view, which equates to about 2 million. Obviously, this self-declaration will need to be will need to be agreed at a national level, but we are confident that that declaration is robust, so that will be going to the board tomorrow. The perinatal safety oversight report, there's nothing to flag in terms of any concerns. I think what we did recognise is a really positive report. Actually, if you look at some of the metrics and some of the achievements that are within there, particularly around some of the CQC's feedback from our patients. So I wasn't going to pull anything specific out of that, except for, as I say, some actually really good achievement within that oversight report. So other than the risks are stated in the appendix, I wasn't going to pull out anything particularly else, Chair. I'll just take questions.
Thanks, Jenny. Points, questions, thoughts, reflections, concerns? I'll start while Luz thinking then, Jenny. In terms of the issues around cancer and elective, which you've talked about, I just wanted to, if you could say a bit more. We talked previously about the need for a recovery plan on the elective, and then you said that this wasn't going as well as hoped. What did we hope would happen that hasn't happened?
There were a couple of key areas, Chair. One was the insourcing and the outsourcing, which took longer to enact than we had envisaged. Particularly the insourcing around some clinical issues that the team wanted some assurance on before we began that. Outsourcing had some delays in terms of their availability to deliver the schemes as procured, and that has now been resolved, so we can pick that up. So that was one of the drivers. We've also had significant sickness in the gynae consultant workforce, with 4 or 5 off sick through November, December time, which impacted on the amount of activity that we could do. And there is also some conversion from advice and guidance that didn't quite meet the expectations that were in the original plan. We've worked through all of those issues and expect that to improve. The bit that we're assessing now is by how much, and does that get us to the targets that we are required to get to for Q4.
Okay, when will you have a view on that, Jenny?
Yes, we're going through the first cut this afternoon, Chair, based on the information at month 9. So that will come back to this meeting next month with our view of confidence of delivery. Okay, thank you.
Beth, please.
So Jenny's absolutely right, and the outsourcing company, the team have actually what they originally committed to deliver for the women's, including the diagnostics and the TCIs. They have failed to deliver on that, so the team have done really well to try and mitigate that and come up with alternative plans. What I do want to say is though, we've been getting some positive recognition from the tiering meetings on cancer performance, and just to note that the latest position is for November, that the women's on the 62-day pathway has seen the best performance since April 2023, and the FDS performance has increased, so they're only 2% behind trajectory. So I do think it was worth noting that we have had a very significant challenge with both cancer and elective performance, but I am convinced, and I am, assured that the team are doing all that they can, working with the corporate ops team to get that back to where it needs to be.
Thank you. Convinced and assured is pretty good. Sue, please.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask a question around the non-recurrent SIPs. You mentioned the slippage there. So just wanted to understand a bit more about what's caused that, and also what are the plans in place? What's the SIP pipeline, the recurrent SIP pipeline look like for 26-27?
Thank you. So yeah, there were a number of schemes specifically around the Hewitt Centre was one around our commercial opportunities that haven't delivered, and a number of smaller schemes. You'll recall from Liverpool Women's, we tend not to at the moment, because of the amount of years we've been in deficit, we tend not to have a number of great big large schemes. There's a lot of small schemes that sit underneath it, but the Hewitt Centre commercial piece was a key one through non-delivery. I was talking to the team yesterday or Monday, and they're really assured of the work that James Thompson's doing through the commercial kind of group, and we think that we can recover that back into next year. We've got mitigations in place, as I say, but some of those, as you can see, are non-recurrent. In terms of next year, the schemes are currently being developed, similar to how Rob was describing before. I don't have the split of recurrent to non-recurrent at the moment for that too, but the actual target is to 100% recurrent. And then obviously we have factored in the non-recurrent delivery of this year as well into the plan that was submitted in the first draft. So that is the target, to get that 100% recurrent. There are some opportunities, and back to Rob's point, with the work that PwC is supporting us with. And I know that there's a lot of focus on Loughton around that, but there are opportunities around productivity, outpatient theatres, etc. for Liverpool Women's as well. We recognise that, and we know that, and there has been for a number of years. The difficulty we have is really getting that out and turning that into a cash release. I was talking to PwC a couple of days ago, and we're talking about, rather than putting these into pillars of theatres, productivity, outpatients, follow-up, we are looking at those pathways and really trying to then just change the way that we do it, given that the last few years hasn't really delivered exactly what we would have wanted it to do. So again, that's feeding into next year's plan for 26-27 CIP. So we are on with it at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
David, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jenny. It's a really clear report. Just one query from me. The financial forecasts mentioned that we're expecting 1.8 million from the ICB for RTT over performance. In view of what we've heard about the Luft conversation, are we confident that that money is going to flow? It's not at risk.
It's not specifically at risk, David. The issue will be whether we deliver the RTT, but that's all being factored into the totality of the plan. We've got opportunities that we were talking about earlier on about going further as well through some of the work in terms of dual payments. So it's not a specific risk, David, in terms of that money not flowing towards us. The risk is more around the total delivery by the end of the year, but that risk is taken into account in the forecast, and so that if it were to transpire, we've got mitigation, and some of that is through the additional funding as well that we're receiving, as noted in the report. So it's not of concern financially.
Right, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Okay, thanks, Jenny. Well done. Jonathan, please.
Morning all. So I will take the paper as read and just take you through the high level areas of escalation or updates for the board. As of the month 8 HMB, we had 9 risks that I'd probably want to highlight. I've split them out into the subsequent kind of finance, performance, quality and people sections. So from a finance point of view, we've talked about the broad green elements in detail in the previous items, but for LHCH, our risk to delivery is in around activity from a commissioning point of view. So Wales performance hasn't moved in line with where we expected it to be at the end of the year. So depending on referrals and activity, there is a risk there. And also our CIP delivery at site. And Rob mentioned in terms of PwC costs that aren't accrued in our forecast at this moment in time. So for LHCH, we do have a likelihood of mid-case plan, but the best case is probably unlikely at this stage. Broad green, I've said we've talked about, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there are risks on the risk register in relation to that. The PwC grip and control meetings are the focus around how we deliver and improve that. In terms of performance, the main area of concern is around our broad green performance and hitting the national standards of RTT and the 1%. That sits within dermatology in the main. I've done some focus meetings with the divisions, and now that Dan Grimes has started as my Director of Ops, he will continue that work. We have got some funding from Consultant Connect to support Q4. We're just looking at how that works on onboarding that new service to try and look at stemming the RTT demand and flow from referrals. In terms of a quality perspective, we have the urgent referral risk still on the risk register at this moment. That's in relation to advice and guidance for middle grade doctors. The support from the group, we are now looking at onboarding patient pass, which is already used at Loughborough at the moment. We're hopeful that that risk will reduce in January once it's formally onboarded, but at the last HMB it hadn't been, so we weren't able to reduce the risk. In terms of the pacemaker recall, again, mitigation plans are continuing to be ongoing, really around how we manage those additional activity in patient cohorts, but we're not expected to see a significant risk materialize from that planning, because both the supplier and my clinical teams are completely on board and engaged in how we resolve that in Q4. A potential note that isn't on the risk register, but you might see it in the IPRs, is that we've had some increases in moderate harm on our LHCH SOF. That's related to some surgical site infection increases that we're just reviewing at this moment, but hasn't increased from a risk register perspective. Depending on the outcomes of how we review that and the mitigations, we'll review that in January's HMB meeting. From a people perspective, the ACHD risk remains as is, but a positive note, we've recruited an additional consultant in partnership with Alder Hey, but query in around implementation, recruitment time, and when that risk will reduce, because we need to get them into the trust and then engage them in the service and how we can reduce that risk overall. The risk that isn't in the paper, but I've mentioned in previous meetings around digital. At HMB, we discussed low-level digital risks, but also a risk in and around the Clatterbridge and Alder Hey partnership elements that needed to be reflected on our risk register. So that's now been added, and will also be a 12, and with Matt and Sarah, it's just around how do we look at that in part of the corporate TOMs and improve that over the next couple of months. The final bit I would say in terms of Q4 priorities, it is really nailing down that annual plan, looking at how the palliative care inpatient bed base on Maple Suite impacts our flow for a site, and then looking at the financial delivery and recovery overall. To note, just in and around performance as well, I have met with the GIRF national team looking at Broad Green Theatre improvement, and we have a bit of a clinical summit next week, led by me with the medical teams to try and look around how we improve that overall as well. But those probably are the key areas I'd want to highlight, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. Very good. Any points, questions? Art Chessboard Green, start with Mike, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. Couple on LHCH, please. Theatre utilisation seems to be going down fairly steadily. Is that a concern? And waiting lists starting to tick up a bit. Is that a part of a trend, or is that a short-term thing, please? Thank you.
So in terms of theatre utilisation, we've seen some staffing elements, perfusion and ODP and scrub nursing that's impacted actual theatre activity. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some complex patients that needed ECMO that has then reduced our ability to deliver additional sessions or activity. So that's where the theatre utilisation has reduced. Depending on that continuation, we have to monitor the complexity and ECMO elements, because we don't provide an ECMO service. So when patients of those levels come in, our perfusionists have to step in and do that element. So then that reduces our activity. I don't see it as a specific concern going into Q4, but it's something we monitor on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the waiting list, increases, it was highlighted in our HMB. It's an increased focus in our weekly performance meeting. I don't see it as an area of concern. I see it as the blip of the holiday period, and we'll look back to get back on track. If you look at our performance in M8 and M9, we're still above trajectory in both the RTT waiting list size and as well as our 52-week percentages.
Thank you.
David, please.
Sorry, didn't have the microphone on. Yeah, thank you. A good report, Jonathan. Really clear. I'm just intrigued about the ongoing reduction in referrals from Wales, and just wondered, how material is it do we have an understanding of what's behind that? Is it a blockage in the referral pipeline? Are the patients going elsewhere? Will it continue? And can we substitute that capacity with patients from other commissioners and be confident of getting reimbursed for the work?
So, right, I'll probably rewind slightly. So we did do a deep dive of the Welsh referrals earlier on in the year. We hadn't seen a significant dip. It was really around the case mix of activity that we were delivering, mainly in around the non-elective and urgent elements. We don't think there's a specific clinical difference in how we're prioritizing patients, but we're not seeing that delivered in the activity. It has been brought up to the Welsh commissioners. They haven't said that any patients are going anywhere else. We do think potentially it could be another one of those, how are they stemming flow of activity from an overall region perspective. There is really nowhere else for those patients to go. So query, is there some sort of difference in how they're managing pathways, or will they manifest at the end of the year? The other question you said, sorry, what was the end point that you mentioned?
Can we use substitute patients from other commissioners to keep that capacity occupied?
So when you look at the activity and the utilisation, and I mentioned it in Mike's question, we are still utilising our sessions unless we have staffing issues. There isn't additional capacity, and we prioritise patients equally. If we do more NHS England patients, the risk that we have is exactly as Rob described with the AQN letter for Luft. We also have that same letter at LHCH that we have been put at risk of overperformance, and will they pay us for that overperformance in an NHS England perspective? Wales and Isle of Man are PBR, so we're hopeful in our forecasting, does that improve? But it is a risk to our mid case and best case.
Okay, thank you.
Jeffrey, please.
Just picking on Dave's point there, Jonathan, is an opportunity to expand the private case mix?
So the private case mix at the moment, so if you look at in the in-depth finance report, LHCH year to date a 1 million deficit of their financial plan for private patients. That's in around CIP in surgery. Again, the surgery capacity has been the specific factor, and as we look at bed pressures into Q4 with the implementation of the palliative suite, I don't know if there's capacity in bed base to match an increase in Q4. What I am looking at is a cross-divisional, cross-site plan, so Broad Green and LHCH together. We do still have one empty ward at this moment in time. Can I consolidate and look at moving staffing around to support a increased PP scheme into next year? And that for me really should support the Royal and Aintree as well in the same factors, because it can't just be a heart and chest kind of capacity. And I am also concerned heart and chest capacity. We've put a lot in our plan for this year, and is there really the patients out there? For a bigger Luft cohort, it might be an easier opportunity with ophthalmology, dermatology, orthopedics, those sort of areas.
Thank you. All good. Aintree next, please, Shahida.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper's in the pack. I'll draw out the salient points. The three items for escalation that we had was the finances, which we've already discussed, so I won't discuss it any further in this section. Secondly was the elective performance risk 9058. Performance has been progressing well in relation to the target of having 0 patients waiting over 65 weeks at the end of December. At the end of November, we were at 10, and I can report at the end of December, there were actually none. So the target was delivered. We are now focusing on the 52-week target. Whilst we do have the more challenge specialties across Luft, our surgical team are working with corporate ops and also across site to see how we can deliver this overall as a trust by the end of March. Thirdly, the third risk is in relation to urgent and emergency care. We've got 2 risks on the register, 9255 and 9340. month 8 was pressurised for us, driven mainly by the increase in respiratory illness and also internal IPC issues that we had. We introduced point of care testing in December to help address this, and due to the pressures that we had on IPC, there was a requirement for additional capacity inside rooms to be opened. At any one point, there was roughly 10 to 15 beds that were out of use due to the IPC challenges that we had. Shown with the performance targets, the 4-hour performance, we improved by 7.86% to 50.33, but remained below the target of 55.5. Our ambulance handover times improved by 6 minutes from the previous month to 48 minutes, slightly below the target of 45. Patients waiting 12 hours, the target was 10%, and we were achieving 16.7. Positively, in relation to the 60-minute wait, we were the target is 50%, and we were positively at 61.1, so it's a good position. 15-minute triage was at 76.5. The friends and family test dipped, you'll see in the IPR, slightly in month, and that was mainly related to corridor care. And it was the second time we were lower than where we were in November 24. And at the end of November, we had 155 patients not meeting criteria to reside. We are working with the implementation of the TOC locally at site level. In terms of overall performance, although November was challenging, going into it also into December, the first 2 weeks were a challenge. However, as we progressed in December, the last 2 weeks over the festive period, performance was good, and we saw the benefit of that going into January. The site remains very busy. However, we are coping with that. In terms of actions, urgent care is one of our improvement within our transformation plans. The focus of that being the ambulance handovers, the same day emergency care, and also the acute redesign. In terms of moving over to just the IPR, RTT, significant improvement. We were at 52.5, the lowest number of waits since June 2021. The 28-day faster diagnosis, we were at 76.8. In relation to the DM01 standard, just under 10% of patients waiting more than 6 weeks against the target of 5. That's mainly in echo, and it is one of our risks. We've got an action plan for that. We're looking at demand and capacity, and we've also asked our medical director to review each patient on the backlog list, which is driving a lot of that underperformance. VTE, we were ahead of target. Sickness for the site, and I know Heather's done this, the paper that we previously discussed. We're at just under 7%, so our short-term sickness was high, and we had a small decrease, a decrease in the long-term sickness. In terms of quality, as I've said, the IPC is a significant issue. We have got that on the risk register, and there's an action plan to support that. In summary, we had a session within the site on the Q4 priorities, and they remain finances, the RTT and ED performance, as well as the plan going into 26-27. So we're monitoring all of those quite closely over the remaining year. I'll just move on to the risks. 15 risks on the register, scoring over 12. 2 risks closed during the period. 9142, which was inability to provide neuroendocrine tumour service at Aintree. And it was related to clinical nurse specialist support. That service is now transferred to the Royal, so that risk is eliminated. The second risk that has changed is 7271, which was the number of patients acquiring hospital infections. That's changed. We've changed that risk to 9377, which is a new risk relating to the IPC. and just to give some flavour of what the work that's going on, our Director of Nursing has devised an action plan to monitor the delivery of that, and it's part of the improvement plan and will be overseen at the Q&S, the site Q&S meeting, feeding into the HMB report. 3 risks reduced during the period: 7530, which was the sustainability of the maxillofacial service. That's reduced following, it was related to gaps in the workforce, but they've been managed to reduce that risk. The second risk that's been reduced is 9135, and that was relating to the issues that we had in terms of governance and assurance around the hospice, Woodlands Hospice, and the site. That risk has reduced, had significant engagement with the hospice, and a task and finish group has been put together, led by one of our clinical medical directors within ED, and that's feeding into the HMB report, so that risk has reduced. And the last one was the 8542, which is the emergency general surgery subspecialty working across sites. That has now been resolved with the Royal colleagues. 14 risks remain unchanged. I wasn't planning on going into the detail of those, so happy to take questions.
Thank you. As this month, as in previous committees like this, a lot of the issues around, particularly around emergency care, and all the associated performance measures and risks in that have been common across Royal and Aintree. So what I'll do, I'll ask Natalie to come straight on now, and then we can have questions and reflections both on the Aintree and the Royal issues for Shahida and Natalie together. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So similar to Shahida, obviously finance was the main topic of the HMB, but I'll leave that as we've covered it in Rob's report. So if I just take the key performance metrics from the IPR, the few I want to pull out. So under the quality section, e-news recording is showing a compliance of 89% and looks like a deterioration. We have now confirmed with the BI team there are some areas being recorded in that shouldn't be. That is being rectified with the nursing teams, and I expect compliance to have improved at next month's HMB when I get the revised chart. We have had 2 MRSA cases in November. One of those cases, the review has been done with the IPC team, and it's believed it was a community acquired MRSA, but there was a delay in taking the cultures from the patient, so we're not able to declare that as community acquired. The second patient is a complex patient who was on critical care for a long period of time, and the full review of that patient is currently ongoing, and at next month's HMB I will have the update on lessons learned from that and how we take any improvements forward that are needed. From a people metrics, appraisals are currently sitting at just under 76%, and you'll see mandatory and role specific training are both hovering just under 90% at 89.6 and 89.17. It was discussed at HMB in depth, and I've asked for divisional level trajectories, which are going to go to next week's People and OD committee. Conscious we are in the peak of winter period, and I don't want those to slip any further. So there is going to be some improvement trajectories for the next 4 months that the divisions are signing up to, and we will oversee that through our People and OD group to ensure that we get above 90% compliance and appraisals back to above 85%. The one thing that I do want to raise under people that is a risk, and you'll see this when we come on to the corporate, linked to one of the corporate risks, is around safeguarding training. So the teams have raised around a deterioration in compliance of the level 3 safeguarding training in our ED department. This is due specific training that can't be undertaken online. It has to be in person. And you'll see in the corporate risk register, we've got some staffing issues within our safeguarding department currently. David and I have discussed this risk, and we are just working through the options of how we look at getting this safeguarding training put on through other means rather than our internal team. So I'm hoping by the time I come back next month, we will have resolved that and have a plan to increase the emergency department compliance. So just then moving on to the performance standards, So urgent and emergency care. So overall for the Royal, November shows obviously a challenged position, and that did continue into December. You will see on the not meeting criteria to reside that we have continued to reduce. So as I referenced earlier, we are maintaining that improvement. We had 75.8% for all types ED performance and 53.6% for type 1. We have managed to maintain the average handover time for ambulances. So that was at 37 minutes in November. It was then at 34 minutes in December. So we are keeping the ambulances moving well and keeping the handovers, but the department is very pressured. So our 12 hours is at just over 16% in November. I just want to reference at this point on UEC, I know Ned's got a briefing that there had been some filming on the ED corridor at the Royal last week that appeared on ITV News. I'd just like to give you a heads up. I've just, while we've been on this meeting, had confirmation that one of the patients that was on that recording identified themselves through the blurred images and has been in touch with ITV and will be doing an account of their experience in the Royal on Good Morning Britain tomorrow morning. I'm assured that's part of a much larger story that will involve multiple hospitals, showing, and it will focus on patients being on corridors and not in dedicated patient spaces. Just to give assurance to you all, the corridor care is exactly as it was when CQC came and inspected us. We are still using the same staffing ratios. We still have the same number of patients on the corridor. And on the wards, our boarding policy is exactly as it was then CQC came in and reviewed. And David has escalated these news coverage to CQC, so they're well aware of everything. So whilst this is absolutely not ideal and we don't want corridor care, the practice is absolutely aligned to our SOPs, and we're providing safe staffing levels. From an elective perspective at the Royal, strong performance on the long wait, so no 65-week breaches and a further reduction in the 52 weeks. So we're down to 221 patients over 52 weeks, and that's 0.75% against the year-end 1% standard. Again, we're working with corporate ops because wherever we can at the Royal, we will aim to reduce that further to support Lough's overall 1% position. And then on cancer, we've seen a 5% improvement in month on the FDS standard at 73.65%. And we got the latest position yesterday, and we're expecting further improvements in next month's IPR, and 62 days is at 71.24%. So strong performance on cancer. The one risk that was raised at HMB was in regards to our breast cancer screening service. You'll remember at a very similar point last year, we had difficulties in this service, and we still have the ongoing radiology vacancies. We have received external funding from the Cancer Alliance, so we're putting on 24 additional sessions throughout January, which will clear the backlog that has built up. So whilst we have got pressure in that service, there is a plan in place, and the Director of Ops is overseeing that throughout January. We made one decision in HMB, which was around emergency general surgery. So you'll remember when the trust merger happened, there was a public consultation, and emergency general surgery was always intended to be part of the Aintree site, and we wouldn't provide that at the Royal. That could never be enacted because of various clinical pathways and issues. So when the Royal opened, emergency general service was not adequately provided for. We've done a lot of work on that, and we have stood up an emergency surgery assessment service on the site. We've got an emergency surgical ward. What we hadn't resolved was a dedicated emergency general surgery rota, and you'll see that's been on my risk register for a number of months. In short, the business case proposes a split to allow a dedicated subspecialty rota and an overall emergency general surgery rota 7 days a week on site, which will be consultant led. And we approved that case, and that directly links to risk 8750 on my risk register, which will be removed as that new rota is implemented from February. Just on the risks, they're all attached and have narrative against them. I just wanted to highlight 3 of them. So 9412 was a new increased risk around the impact of the rate card. So we went to standardised rate cards for doctors across Cheshire and Mersey. From a Royal perspective, throughout the month of December in particular, we've seen increase in patient safety risks in relation to our acute medical rota and our emergency department cover. these rotas have got significant gaps. The Royal would usually run on 2 medical registrars overnight. It's particularly the unsocial hours shifts that aren't being picked up, and we've had increased sickness. And we've had numerous occasions where we're about to run into the evening with no medical registrar cover. So we've had to ask the consultant to step down and cover the shift overnight. Regularly now, we are having to run over the last 3 weeks with only 1 registrar at the Royal overnight on acute medicine, and that is not sustainable. We took a paper through execs this week, and we're just working through the proposal, but the mitigation for this risk is we are going to potentially reinstate the old rate card for the most senior doctor for unsocial shifts, because across both the Royal and Aintree, that is where we are seeing some considerable risks. And the financial impact from our early workings is that it is costing us more in consultants having to cover the shifts and lose their time the next working day than it will be to reinstate the old rate card. So we're just working through that with Jim and Heather currently. Risk 9348 was a new risk in the dental hospital. Just to say that has now been resolved. That was around some medical equipment needed to enable them to read the radiographs. That is resolved and will be removed from the risk register as we've purchased the equipment needed. And 8307 was the risk from the surgical division around the lack of robotic capacity to enable us to treat all the patients that we're asking for robotic capacity, particularly in urology and complex gynae. And again, as Jim's mentioned, the robot arrived in Royal Theatres on the 23rd of December, and that risk is now being removed from the risk register. All of the risks on the Royal Risk Register you have seen before, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. It's very difficult to overgeneralise when there's such complexity across both Aintree and the Royal sites, particularly around the winter pressures issues. But I do think the performance over the period, as highlighted by Shida and Natalie in these papers, and the continued improvement in lots of areas, elective and non-elective, has been really excellent over this past period. And I think the reports are incredibly positive in showing all of that, and it's outstanding performance under extreme pressure. Thank you. Mike first.
Thank you. Absolutely echo those comments. Really do. Now, can I just ask about the EGS business case, which I wholly support? And it's a kind of governance monitoring question, really. It'd be a lot easier if it was one of those that you make a change over here and you see an income improvement over there, and you can track that. This is effectively calibrated around efficiency savings and reorganisation. How will that be tracked through in terms of identifying whether it achieved?
So it's a complex one, Mike. So there's a number of things actually that fund this case. So actually the bulk of the funding will come from the consultants did a 3-month diary exercise to show their current PAs allocation. So they have agreed they will recycle their current PAs. So we're taking nearly 30 PAs off the consultants' current job plans, and they'll be reissued as part of the new on-call rota. So a lot of it is just changes within the consultant body. We also have got 2 locums in at the minute, so we will save those premium costs. When this rota goes in, we no longer need those locums to support. So most of it is fully funded through those changes. There is then just £60,000 left, which is around efficiency savings, income, which is going into the planning process, etc. What I have asked is, this is going into my sustainable services project now within my transformation board. So this will go in, and I've asked that we monthly track the job plan changes, the income planning, etc., just to confirm and make sure that everything stacks up as we've approved it at HMB. So you'll start to see that come back through my future transformation board updates.
Great, thank you.
Sue, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the corridor care, and I take your point, Natalie, that the quality of care and the standards are the same as the ward standards. I'd just like to understand a bit more in terms of how many patients do we have, how long are they on the corridor for, what our plans are to ensure that this issue is reduced, particularly the next winter period. I know this links into my comments earlier for no criteria to reside and length of stay, and if we can, reduce that, that'll impact on the corridor care. Just with the national focus on corridor care at the moment, I think the board, it'd be useful for us to have a bit more granular detail on the mitigations and assurances around this. So that was one point. My second point is around complaints data. What is the complaints data looking like at the moment? Is it as we would expect? And how does that link into referrals to PALS, particularly with it being the winter?
Yeah. Okay. So first point two on the numbers. So we have we only have to put up to 20 patients on the corridor. So we have 20 spaces, dedicated spaces on the corridor. We staff those, so there are one nurse and one healthcare assistant to every 5 patients that are put on a corridor. But then we need to also realise on each ward there are up to 2 spaces that we have identified that we would board a patient on. So it's not just an ED that we put patients in non-ideal spaces. We're also doing that on the wards, and there are up to it's about 19 to 20 patients when we're at full escalation across the wards in the hospital that we would do that. With regards to our processes for the corridor, what we also need to be careful of is nationally, we have to report how many patients we put on the corridor. The way we run it at the Royal, and it's the same at Aintree actually, is we see patients in ED, we assess them, we make sure they're stable, and when they are waiting for a bed and all they're waiting for is then go to bed, we will move them onto the corridor to wait to then move to the acute medical unit. So we put our safest patients that have been fully assessed and triaged on there. Now, what that is meaning is our total number on that corridor, if you look at it, how many people have been on a corridor today, has gone up because we're turning that corridor over faster. One of the things that boards have to do from April in the guidance we've been sent recently is we will need to update our IPR to show you how many patients have been on a corridor each week. What I've asked BI is that they also include an average time on the corridor so that you can see on average though, is that corridor turning over quickly? Because obviously we'd rather a patient be there 2 hours and have 5 people do that than someone be on there 48 hours. So I hope that answers that, Sue, and you'll start to see through the IPRs at site much more detail on that. Mitigations, absolutely, it's our UEC improvement plan. It's continuing everything we've done on them, not meeting criteria to reside. All I would say is it is far from where we want to be, but if we look at where we were at this point last year, we were much more escalated across the 2 sites by we had been for the last 3 weeks at this point last year. So I think whilst we're not where we want to be, we have made positive steps when we compare how we've managed this winter compared to last so far across both the Royal and Aintree.
Okay, thank you. Just on the complaints.
Oh, sorry, complaints. Yeah, we do usually, as you say, Sue, we do usually see a peak in those in December and January. At the minute, I sign off every complaint for the site, as does Pete. I haven't actually received any formal ones yet for sign off in relation to ED, but we do always receive a few around escalation spaces, boarding, etc. But not seeing any particular increase in those, but that is a general theme, is when patients have been boarded.
Thank you.
David, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Natalie. I have to say, when I've done my non-executive walkabouts, I've always been struck by how well cared for the patients are in the corridor. It's not, as you say, an ideal situation, but the staff seem very attentive and do seem to be focused on the care. I welcome what you've said about giving us an insight into average number of patients on corridor and average time spent on corridor. Could I ask if you could add to that some indication of the maximum time patients spend on the corridor? A good friend and neighbour of ours recently spent 3 days on a corridor in another hospital in another place, and I was really disappointed at that had happened. And I'd just like to be assured that that would only happen in our hospitals in the most extreme circumstances.
Absolutely, David. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Sheila, please.
Thanks, Chair. So just to respond, in addition to what Nat said, we've got 15 spaces at least on the corridor that we utilise, and we do have the boarding. What we are going to trial, though, is instead of having patients waiting to go into a bed on boarding, is to have the patients that are ready for discharge to be boarded to alleviate some of that pressure and angst for the patients that are waiting to go in, given they are sicker than the ones obviously leaving. So that's a different way of we only discussed last week at HMB that we're going to trial for our boarded areas.
Thank you. Any other points? Okay, good. Thank you very much. All site reports. Important that we stick close to the risks through this critical period. Corporate risks. Is this you, James?
Yes, Chair, I'm going to do this. There's the usual report on this month. There's no new risks, but there's a couple of changes to existing ones. Firstly, the EPR recruitment issue, which Matt has got going through his digital risk and assurance group, and is predicting that score will reduce, which I think is this week, Matt. You've got that meeting.
Yeah, it's next week, but it's also linked to the EPRIB final sign off business case as well. So we'll see that reduce. Yeah.
Thank you. The corporate nursing issue, which is the safeguarding one, which has been referenced already, and Nat mentioned in her report, is also at the moment scored at 12. We've emphasised in the report there that we're still fulfilling the statutory responsibilities, and there were actions taken to recruit some additional posts to try and resolve that problem. But David Melia may want to come in on that one in a second. And the corporate medical risk around the extra contractual rate is exactly what you've just heard again. Jim had put this on as a corporate issue. You heard in Nat's report some of the challenges, particularly at the Royal, on that. So again, we've got a solution, we think, to some of that. So that should see a review and reduction as we go into next month. And the financial risk is the same score given where we are in the year, but just probably helpful to go back to David, Chair, on the safeguarding risk.
David.
Thank you very much. Thanks, James. So I brought a paper to execs, or raised the items to execs just before Christmas around this, about a potential temporary solution. The safeguarding team for Luft has got quite a lot of sickness and absence, long-term, very genuine issues, and so I had secured from execs the ability to be able to provide a further 2 members of safeguarding team on a temporary basis. We're going through the process now of recruiting or getting secondments for that. As soon as we're able to have that in post, or in place rather, I'll be reducing the risk. With the relation to the issue that Nat mentioned about the training, that's a knock-on effect from some of the sickness and absence. What I'm doing is I'm talking to other safeguarding teams, not just in Liverpool but elsewhere, around the opportunity for them to be able to provide some ad hoc further training for level 3 for our ED staff.
Thanks, David. Any questions for James or David, please? Okay, thank you, Leah. And anything in the integrated performance reports that we haven't covered through the site reports that anyone wishes to raise? Okay, thank you. Is there any other business, Daniel, that we need to do in the meeting?
There's no other business. I just wanted to advise ARC members that obviously we referenced earlier the enforcement undertakings. We have formally responded to the to NHSE region, and we'll wait for final versions of the enforcement undertakings that we would expect next week, and they'll be published on the NHS England website.
Thank you. I might have a bit more to say about that in our meeting tomorrow. Is there anything else anyone wishes to raise before I close the meeting? Okay, thank you all very much indeed. Apologies for going 10 minutes over. I'll try and get that back for you in tomorrow's meetings. Good to see everyone. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.